Proverbs 25 as we continue our rock skipping journey through the book of Proverbs. And I'm sure I've done more than one. I take one sermon. Sometimes it ends up being 2 or 3 sermons, but I think I'm on number 175 or 179, something like that, on my notes. And I'm sure the back there would be, they have a more accurate how many times. But we've been walking through the book of Proverbs. I took it on as a challenge. Had never taught through it before, and have been enjoying it. There are some repetitions. Tonight is not, well, in some sense it is, but we're now past the life of Solomon, and we are in the Proverbs of Solomon with that the men of Hezekiah, the king of Judah, copied out. It would be about 250 years past Solomon, and did a lot of speculation. Where did they find them? They're still writings of Solomon, but they were not posted or listed until after some 250 years after Solomon had ruled and reigned. And so, but nonetheless, they're enjoyable. And so Proverbs 25, I'd like to speak on for a title. I've entitled it Words Fitly Spoken. Words fitly spoken. I'll give you the last. Don't turn me off if I give you the conclusion, because I'm not. But it really kind of sets the pace. In my conclusions, number 1, words matter. Number 2, actions speak louder than words. And number 3, our work ethics can be seen and become a value to those whom we serve. That's really the context of our verses tonight. We're having the idea that words fitly spoken. And I'd like to read Proverbs 25, 8 through 13, if I may. And I'll stop at the end of 13 and then have a word of prayer, and then we'll talk about that subject. Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another, lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. A word fitly spoken, there's my title. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. As an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. As the cold snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him, for he refresheth the soul of his masters. It's all about words tonight. And Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for the sweet time that we can study your word. Help us as we grow in you. Part of that growth is to know when to speak, to know what to speak, and maybe even more importantly, when not to speak. Help us that we would be a testimony that would be honorable in thy sight. And so, Lord, help us as we study these few thoughts tonight, and may your name be glorified. Amen. I was very overwhelmed with this subject of words because in Old and New Testament, the Bible is just, wow, overwhelming in words of conduct and control. And I'm going to give you a few. There's several hundred. And so we could just read Bible verses and say amen tonight. The words are that, it's so expositive, so to expound on it, it's just so much. But I was interested in that little thought about words fitly spoken. Because we have a struggle. In fact, I put it down here, I believe one of the greatest challenges we have in our life is how to control our tongue. It's so easy to allow one's emotions to interject, and the lips start engaging before the brain has had a chance to catch up. And usually when that takes place, words that can't be taken back are usually said. The Bible has a lot to say about it. I'm going to just give you a few. Job said this in Job 6:24, "Teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand wherein I have erred." So there is a word of warning. Psalms 10, verse number 7, "His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity." Psalm 12:3, "The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaketh proud things." Psalm 39:1, "I said, I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle, while the wicked is before me." Psalm 52, "The tongue deviseth mischief, like a sharp razor, working deceitfully." Proverbs 10 and verse number 20, "The tongue of the just is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is little worth." James in the New Testament says 5, 6, and then down to verse number 8, he says, James 5 and 6, it says, "Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire of a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell." James then goes on to verse number 8, "But the tongue can no man tame. It is unruly, evil, full of deadly poison." And in 1 Peter, I'll end there. There's a lot more, but these are just kind of highlights about the tongue. "For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips, that they speak no guile." There's a lot of truth in those verses about the tongue. Words fitly spoken. I broke it down into 3 simple points. Point number 1 is found in verses 8 through 10, and I entitled it "Provoking Words." Back into our text. "Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another, lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away." That little word "strive," we've looked at it before because of Proverbs has been talking about how we conduct ourselves around each other. But in this strife, and it's not uncommon, it's not undifferent to others times where we've come across that same word, it represents not just physical altercations. We think strife is to, put them up. We're gonna duke it out. But strife can also be described with words or conduct or even a lawsuit. And so in this manner, that's kind of where it is leaning. "Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof." In the legal manner of strife, Solomon is saying, if you have an issue with your neighbor, be careful that if you take it to the law, that you realize, this is my personal thought and that I wrote down, even if you're right, you could still be found in the wrong. Going to the law doesn't guarantee that all truth will bring forth the right judgment. Because there are people that sit in the place of authority that have no desire for the righteous to walk away with a right standing. They look for opportunities to rule against them. I'm thinking about our own country, how in an uproar it is that we have. It's the job of each president to appoint federal judges, and then they have to go through the confirmation through Congress and be confirmed through the Senate, and for so many years, and it really, they're not looking about right and wrong. They're asking what philosophy of your interpretation. I mean, we have someone sitting on the Supreme Court right now that she doesn't even know if she's a woman or a man because she can't figure out what it is. We have a problem in our land. So Solomon is no different. I mean, we're talking thousands of years now. And he's saying just because you're right, you need to be careful when you strive against your neighbor. You take them to go to task to the law, because you may not win. And then there's the conduct. And so I put down here, we are given wisdom concerning taking legal action. We may be right, yet could easily lose a verdict in the court of law, which could cause great harm in one's testimony. And so we need to be careful. There are several things that we have said about, and we'll get into them here in just a minute. But I was just thinking about that. Then go down to verse number 9 as it continues on. He says, debate thy cause with thy neighbor. And you see that word himself, a lot of italicized in these verses because of the nature of the Hebrew language. They had to insert it to make it a proper English sentence. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another. That little word discover literally means to make known. What is he saying in verse number 9? It is much better to go to thy neighbor alone and resolve any issues that may be between oneself and neighbor. And in the middle of it, be very careful. And here is, boy, I hate to say it, but it happens even in churches, that when one person sees the wrong or the perceived wrong of an action, instead of going to that person alone, as the Bible describes to us, if you have aught against a brother, you go to them alone. And he said, if that becomes successful, you've gained back a brother, you've got the fellowship restored. If you can't do that, then you take a witness of 2 or 3, that the truth would be established. If that is not possible, then you bring them before the church. It's an escalation or a steps of proper how to resolve the issue. But in this case, he tells us, he says, debate thy cause with my neighbor himself. Otherwise, don't go around and getting all of your friends and events and saying, I'm right and I need someone backing me. And you can't, I don't know that there'd be anyone here that couldn't say, I know exactly what you're talking about, preacher. It happens in our workforce. You know you're doing the right thing. That other guy that has been bugging you for weeks and perhaps months, he's all of a sudden got his buddies and he's putting his 2 cents worth in, and next thing you know, there's 6 of them that have got accusation against you, and you're still doing the same thing, exactly what your boss told you to do, and they're trying to make it that you're at fault and they want your job terminated. Tell me, is that not true? I mean, it happens all the time. The sad part about it happens in church as well, in the church house. And he says, it is better. And he says, and discover not a secret to another. He says, don't go blab it around the neighborhood so that you get your cause. So a couple years ago, you know the incident that took place. And we had an incident here at the church grounds. And I stood my ground. And I'm not going to go into all details in case someone happens to be listening or watching, but it did not end well. And the police were called. It was more for safety and documentation. That person then was trespassed and said, that's private. Because what he was claiming is he could come in, this is public property, he can do what he wanted on the church property. And the police said, no, that's private property. And so what did he do? He went around all the neighbors, and we are a hated commodity in our neighborhood these days. It hadn't changed any. Sad commodity. How much better would it have been just to solve it? And I tried. I did everything as I could, and I finally just had to say, no, you're not going to damage the church building, and you're not going to damage the people as the pastor. I am the under shepherd. It's my job to watch over, and it's not going to happen. And yet I cannot control what another person says or does. It's my job to control what I do. And so I did not go about into all that. I still haven't gone to the neighbors and explained why they're so mad at me. So if they want to accept false statements, that's perfectly fine. But I'm not. If they come and ask me, I will talk. But I'm just saying, it's not my job to grab it and blab it. It's my job to preach the gospel. It's my job to stand for truth. And so we need to be very careful. The tongue is the susceptibility. It's the avenue that the devil will use so often to cause others to then become discouraged and even leave a New Testament church because of what somebody said. And we know that to be true as well. And verse number 9, I wrote down this, speaking of good, the church, verse 9 speaks of going to our neighbor with the intent to settle a matter before seeking legal actions. It is important to seek wise counsel and not allow emotion to be the driving force causing us to go into a lawsuit. Now, let me give you some scriptures in the New Testament. Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 41. Pre-printed them out for sake of time. Matthew 5, 38 through 41. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. See, our job is sometimes, boy, that's a hard one. Our job sometimes when falsely accused is to leave it in the hands of God. That's a tough one because our nature, the natural man, wants to say, I'm going to get even. I'm going to get those behind me and I'm going to make it right. We need to be very careful. Paul wrote this in 1 Corinthians 6 and verse number 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse number 7. Now therefore, there is utterly a fault among you, because you go to law one with another. Why do you not rather take wrong? Why do you not rather suffer yourselves to be defrauded? Question Paul asked. If someone makes us, and he's not talking about outside of the fellowship and the membership of the local New Testament church. He's talking about the actions within the church. People, he was actually called it a shame that we would bring the law in a manner when Christians in a New Testament church ought to be willing. And here's the conduct, and I know I'm going to rabbit trail for just a second, but we are going to be God's judges. So why are we not God's judges? There was, before I ever arrived here, 24 years ago, I was elected and invited to come. I had not yet gotten here, and there was a dispute. And I could go into the details, but it doesn't matter. But there was a dispute. I love the conduct of Bills Lake Baptist Church. They called me up and said, Pastor, this is what's taking place and the event that is going on, and what do you recommend? They want to bring it to a lawsuit. And I said, would the church be willing to become the judge and jury of the lawsuit? We are to conduct ourselves among our brethren. And they came back and said, yes, they would be willing. And the finding of the men of the church, as they heard the matter, they prayed about it, made the decision, whatever the decision was, that's what it would be the settlement of. And got news a few days later that took place. It wasn't exactly an amicable, didn't work out the way everyone wanted it, but it was settled. And they did it through biblical standards. I like that. We ought, and that's what Solomon's saying. There is a proper way to deal with those things that are set in wrong against us, and it doesn't include Christians suing a Christian. So, enough said. Verse number 10 speaks of the cost of a hasty action. Look at verse number 10. Lest he that heareth it put thee to shame. Otherwise, don't be out there blabbing to others. Why? Because those that have just heard it will then have their own opinions and come up with it. And he says, lest he that heareth it be put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. Now, infamy is not a word that we use. That last time, I think the first time I ever heard it was Roosevelt after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. A day that will live in infamy. That little word infamy literally means a standing that will turn from generation to generation. And in this case, he's saying, lest he hath heard it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. And that thine infamy literally means the evil report. A day that will live in infamy. It was the evil report that happened to us in a nation will not be forgotten. I'm sad to say, we're now reached to the generation that the people have forgotten. And but he said, so infamy literally means evil report, whisperings, a defamation, unfavorable sayings. And it continues on and on and on. Well, we go into point number 2, and I've entitled it, Profitable Words. The first one was provoking words. Let's look at profitable words. I like this one. This one's an uplifting one. Verse number 11 and verse number 12. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. As an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. I just looked at some words and did some studies, but I was also looking at different commentaries, and they all seem to lean toward this. This is a metaphor that would be used in the idea of being in the presence of royalty. When you go into a royal chamber, they will have fresh fruits, and then they will have displayed of gold and silver or things that just to represent their regal, their throne in which they represent. And so when Solomon spoke of this, he's speaking in that kind of a manner. But let's just book it down. That little word, fitly spoken, I like that. It literally means to be kept in due order. A discord well put together would be another one. And so a word fitly spoken, when words are gathered together for the purpose of truth, that's the words fitly spoken. It is keeps in due order and a discord that is well put together. If we are going to stand before, we don't have royalty, but if we are going to stand before judges, and you choose to represent yourself, it would be the wisest thing you could do is not stand before the judge and say, Judge, I ain't got no good name to just put on that matter. That's not, you'll hire a lawyer because he's got the vocabulary to say, Your Honor, we contest this accusation that is before us. So it is a matter of fitly spoken is the idea of words put together in the presence of authority will gain respect. And he said this is what it is. When it's together and done right, it looks like apples of gold and pictures of silver. And just looking it up and trying to decipher it, I wrote this down. Valuable and precious in the proper time and place. So fitly spoken are valuable and precious. It's going to go on they pleasing to the eye. So it says fitly spoken, like apples. So it is pleasing to the eye. When words are spoken, those that are watching are saying, that person has well rehearsed. They understand why they're standing before royalty, before authority. And so a word fitly spoken, not only it says very pleasing to the eye, it is the word that is spoken, it attaches to the ear. Now go back in, and it says in verse number 12, it says this, the words fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver, as an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold. So is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. Now, boy, we always say earrings. Oh, no, earring. What is an earring? In the realm of being around royalty, it would be not uncommon that those in the royal palace would have earrings, and I don't know were they pierced, were they clip-ons, were they hang-ons. I don't have that information. Earrings it was attached to the ear in some manner, but it was designed, and notice the outcome of it, as an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold. It's the idea when words are spoken, it's like the glistening of, why do we put ornaments on Christmas trees? We put those little balls and then put the lights on there and the wind goes and we used to have what's that, silver tinsel. Yeah, can't even get that anymore. You get some tinsel on there and the wind blows and it just glistens, gets our attention. Ooh, that's pretty. Well, words that are fitly spoken in the presence of authority gives us the idea of if it's being received as it got the attention of those who have heard it, and they said, this is enjoyable, it's pleasant, I like it. And so it speaks about gold earrings that seem to draw attention and compliment the wearer. And then, so I wrote this, so the wisdom received by others are a good reflection to the one who receives. Now, we didn't just words fitly spoken. Let's look at what the words are accomplishing. In verse number 12, they're wordly spoken. If it's done right, it is like the tinsel on the tree. It catches our eyes. We're mesmerized by it. Wow, it is beautiful. But listen to this. So is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. These are not just words of lifting one up. These are words of corrections in order to help lift one up. We don't like that thought, but sometimes we carry actions, attitudes, habits in our life that drag us down to be equal to the things of this world. And God wants you and I, as a child of God, to be lifted up above the things of the world. How does that take place? Oh, sometimes it's pleasant. We read the Bible and say, ooh, I like that, and it helps us change. But in this case, we find that it is words of reproof. Boy, I don't have that in my notes, but I think Paul said something about that, didn't he? Reprove, rebuke, and exhort. But I like the other part of it, the rest of it, with all long suffering, that the man of God may be thoroughly furnished. I like that. So the reprover is coming into the presence and dealing in perhaps even in a public manner. In today's society, we praise publicly, we rebuke or correct privately. Sometimes private correction is necessary and appropriate. When an offense is private, it doesn't need to be made public. But when an offense is made in public, then the reproof, the correction, needs to be taken care of in public as well. Because in that reproof, one, it's a lesson to those who are watching that restoration take place. And two, it helps to restore. They're not just, and I'll just use it, Bills Lake Baptist Church. They didn't just come back to Bills Lake Baptist Church. They came back and we received them because whatever that was, and we don't have any actions that I would say that need to be taken care of at this moment. But if someone were to come in and say, I did this, this, and this, and it hurt the testimony of Bills Lake Baptist, and they come before the church and say, I'm sorry, I'm asking for your forgiveness. That's the reproof that is of, it's like fine gold. It's the refiner. And then it gives us the opportunity to then bring that restoration into completion. Has nothing to do with my message, but I was just thinking about that. A wise reprover. Listen to this. I wrote this down. Skillful and prudent to rebuke or correct. It is a wise person who knows the value of rebuke and correction. So not only it is the wisdom of the rebuker, it is also the wisdom of the rebuked. It is the one who's speaking the correction is using his or her skills to help that person. But it doesn't help that person if that person's not willing to accept the correction. But when the person accepts the correction, it's kind of like that two-edged sword. It's kind of like that iron sharpening iron. We start to hone out those things so that we will be a tool fit for the master's use. Wise reprover is skillful to rebuke or to correct. And it is a wise leader who values honesty from wise counsel. So the receiver of that rebuke, it's wisdom. And we need to be very careful that we don't turn around and give false assumption that everything I say to those that are in authority, you need to say something to me as a pastor and say, I saw something, I heard something, I saw something of an action, and I'm kind of curious. And if it's wrong, it's wrong, and we'll make it right, and we'll restore it. But it's not everyone's job to go out and try to be the one who's going to make sure that the preacher's walking straight and narrow. We all have our own faults. Be very careful that when the faults start to be a daily process to who you can find fault with, be very careful that they don't turn that around and find fault with your own actions individually. It is so a wise leader values honesty, so that reprover is that the value of that is wise reprover is a reprover upon an obedient ear. That obedient ear is the wise leader who hears that correction. David had that. You remember with Bathsheba? And the prophet came up to him. I don't think David felt real good that he was a wise reprover, but he was. And he says, "Thou art the man." And David knew it. And he knew it. And he knew the cost that he was going to pay when he knew what he had done. But he also knew that getting things right with God was important as well. Imagine carrying that guilt and then have to stand up and say, I was wrong. He had done a charge unto death, and yet God spared his life. And then said, God called him a man after God's own heart. Why? Because David's heart was tender to receive that rebuke and make the corrections. Now, get into the last one. So we've looked at provoking words, profitable words, and the last one, we got a couple minutes left, we can do it. Prosperous words. Prosperous words. Listen to this. As the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him, for he refresheth the soul of his masters. What is he talking about? If you've worked on a farm before, harvest time is the hottest of the season. It is when the sun has come out. I'm thinking specifically hay and getting ready to bale hay. The hay is cut, the ground is cut, the hay is laid out. A couple times it gets turned over and it starts turning brown. And it doesn't do any good to have a rainy season when hay's out there. They need it hot. They need it sunny. It needs to dry it out so that when it's baled together and it's compressed together, it doesn't create the decomposition causing heat. Whole barns have grown burnt down because they've baled it too soon, and the compressment of that causing decomposition, causing heat. And whole farms have been burnt down because of the combustion of the hay. And in this case, he's saying, during the harvest time, a day like the winter. What is he talking about? A day. It's like when we were down at Camp Taylorsville several years ago, and I told you about it when going down there. It got down into the 60s. Now, down in the 60s, when you're in Taylorsville, North Carolina, it's like being in the 40s and 50s up here. I mean, everyone's got their hoodies on, and they've got their feet covered and their blanket over their lap because it got down to 68 degrees and they couldn't take it. Well, he's saying in his statement here, I'll get back to my text, as the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him. Otherwise, just that cool day when they're out in the field and it should be a hot, scorching day, all of a sudden that cool breeze comes over and you want to stand up and just say, ooh, I just want to breathe for just a minute. Nice, cool air. And he said, what does that attribute to? It is like a faithful messenger. That little word messenger, it's the same anglios. It's the same word that is used for angel. Angel is the word that means messenger. So a faithful messenger, a faithful messenger to them that send him. It is, in the case of a master, it is a master who can trust a servant, a slave, an employee, to take his message to where it needs to go and say what it needs to be said. He said it's like a breath of fresh air. That is the prosperous words. And he says, in doing so, for he refreshes the soul of the master. You know what I also found out, I was doing some studies about this. Did you know that during Solomon time in the winter, they had a harvest fest on the lakes? We thought we invented the what do you call it, the ice box. Solomon had that. In history, they have times they've studied it where they would go up north where it was snow and such. They would harvest the water, bundle it up, cover it up, and bring it in and hide it in the caves. Why? So in the middle of the summer, chip off a little bit of ice and put it in that soft drink and have a nice cool drink. He said the words of a faithful messenger, it's a refreshment upon our lives. Even during that Solomon time, nothing better than a cool drink in the heat of summer it brings great refreshing. So is the words that are fitly spoken. So, we find that a faithful messenger is a great reward because he or she can be trusted, allowing the king and his court to rest, knowing that the work is done and done well. So we come to the conclusion where I started out. 3 things about words. Number 1, words matter. Number 2, actions can speak louder than words. And number 3, our work ethic can be seen and become a value to those who serve. Words matter. Our actions matter because they speak volumes without a word ever being spoken. But we need to be careful. The mouth is a tool that the devil loves to use. I better just shut up and let's close and sing a song. Father God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for the sweet time. We can call upon your name. Thank you for words that have taught us and help us, that we would conduct ourselves while we're among our brethren in our New Testament churches, and that we would conduct ourselves when we walk outside of here knowing that we are ambassadors for thee. Help us that our words would be as gold in pictures of silver. They be valuable for your use. Bless now this time. Amen.